Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive challenge, one that literally every professional, leader, and organization wrestles with at some point, and that is, how do we actually solve complex, systemic organizational challenges? I mean, we live in a world where information is everywhere, but true actionable alignment, that is incredibly rare. So today, we're going to explore how to bridge that gap by looking at 3 fascinating case studies that prove we don't just need more meetings, we need a completely new way of thinking.
So what now? We've all been there, right? You walk out of this incredible conference or a huge strategy offsite or a really high-stakes stakeholder meeting. The energy in the room is just electric. The keynote speakers hype you up, those breakout sessions completely inspire you, and you leave feeling like, yes, we are going to change the world. And then, well, you go back to your desk. Monday morning hits. All that momentum just evaporates, and we're left asking this exact, inevitable question. So what now? The brilliant insights get buried in notebooks, and the status quo pretty much remains untouched.
Here's how we're going to break it down today. 1. The collaboration crisis. 2. Empowering not-for-profits. 3. Cultivating ag-tech innovation. 4. Rethinking corporate conferences. And 5. The collective intelligence solution. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The collaboration crisis. The limits of working in silos and how fragmentation leads to death by meetings.
Moving on to Section 2. Empowering not-for-profits, breaking egos and sharing services.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp the scope of this crisis, we're looking at a deep dive report by BDO in Brisbane alongside the Project Management Institute Queensland. They used a collective ideation platform called Mindhive to study the social sector. And you know, it's so important to ground ourselves in what this sector is actually all about. It's about the human element. Not-for-profits are built to serve communities. But lately, especially with the wild disruptions from COVID-19, they've been facing massive instability. They've had to radically reevaluate their effectiveness and ask some really hard questions about what has permanently changed and honestly what needs to morph just to ensure their survival.
When BDO asked the sector to identify their biggest hurdles, the data showed exactly what's keeping these leaders up at night. Get this. A staggering 75% of contributors cited an urgent need for not-for-profit organizations to collaborate. Another 75% pointed to intense change fatigue and the ongoing shockwaves of COVID-19 policies. Add to that the fact that 60% believe that increasing compliance is literally killing their organizations. The traditional model, where every charity fights for the exact same limited resources while just drowning in independent administrative burdens, is simply no longer sustainable.
Now, what's really interesting here is that this specific quote was the most liked comment from the entire discussion base. The community themselves recognized the solution. They highlighted the absolute urgency of modeling collective rather than individual responses to crises. They hit the nail on the head, pointing out that community problems, things like affordable housing, insecure work, health access, they're all deeply interdependent. So naturally, the solutions have to be interdependent too. The consensus clearly pointed toward a need for conscious, non-ego-based leadership, and even the creation of a shared services organization. Imagine charities combining their HR, IT, and accounting to completely maximize their frontline impact.
All right, Section 3. Cultivating ag-tech innovation, bridging the gap in the public sector.
Let's pivot and see how this builds in a completely different environment. We're stepping out of the charity space and into the massive high-stakes arena of government agriculture and tech innovation. Australian agriculture is an absolute economic powerhouse, expected to contribute over $88 billion to the economy. In Queensland, driving productivity means adopting ag-tech. We're talking precision agriculture, climate resilience tools, and IoT, or Internet of Things-enabled farming. But the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries hit a massive roadblock: completely fragmented stakeholder engagement. You had farmers out in the field, researchers in their labs, and policymakers in government offices, all completely siloed from one another. They desperately needed to co-design a strategic ag-tech roadmap, but clearly, traditional town hall meetings just weren't going to cut it.
So to structure this absolute chaos, they brought in the Mindhive platform, and they broke the process down into 3 clean steps. First up, using AI-curated discussion templates that were tailored specifically around barriers to ag-tech adoption. Second, creating a space for transparent, inclusive collaboration across more than 200 diverse participants. And third, utilizing advanced analytics to automatically synthesize all those stakeholder inputs into key priority areas. This is such a brilliant example of turning noise into clear direction. By using a digital collective intelligence platform, they hit an incredibly impressive 16.2% active participation rate from those stakeholders.
And the result of all that structured engagement, an 82% stakeholder engagement satisfaction rate. I mean, wow, that number is absolutely huge for a public sector policy initiative. By making the ideation process completely transparent and data-driven, participants didn't just feel like they were being heard, they actually trusted the outcome. The government was able to deliver a policy-ready ag tech roadmap with really clear, actionable steps because the very people who had to implement it were the ones who helped build it.
That brings us to Section 4, Rethinking Corporate Conferences, Active Ideation in the Private Sector.
So we've seen this work in the nonprofit sector and the public sector. Now let's jump over to the private sector and look at how we gather in the corporate world. We're going back to BDO, but this time looking internally at their own massive corporate event. BDO is a major firm, over 1,900 people across 10 offices in Australia. When they flew their delegates from all over Australia and New Zealand to the Gold Coast for their National Audit and Assurance Conference, they knew they were facing a critical challenge. They were spending a massive amount of time and money bringing their brightest minds together. They absolutely had to avoid that dreaded "so what now" outcome we talked about at the beginning of the explainer. They needed every insight, every question, and every action documented to present to their board.
Their solution? Honestly, it was pretty bold. They completely reimagined the traditional conference format. You know the old way, passive listening, typing away personal notes on a laptop, and then forgetting all those brilliant insights by Tuesday? Well, BDO actually banned laptops during their sessions. No way, right? Instead, they used Mindhive as a live digital discussion board. Delegates were required to reflect on key messages using their phones, jumping into live surveys and discussion boards that were literally broadcast on the big screens in real time. They essentially turned a passive audience into an active, collective brain, and that resulted in a comprehensive, board-ready report the minute the conference concluded.
And finally, Section 5, the Collective Intelligence Solution, the Universal Thread.
So, the crucial point is this. Whether you're a charity trying to survive a pandemic, a government department working to modernize farming, or a corporate accounting firm running a massive national conference, the core solution to fragmentation is exactly the same. Let's synthesize some key takeaways drawn right from the AgTech white paper, which perfectly summarize this whole philosophy of collective intelligence. First, inclusive engagement. When you connect diverse stakeholders, you aren't just getting ideas, you're getting actionable, fully accepted outcomes. Second, technology as an enabler. You simply can't do this with flip charts and sticky notes anymore. You need digital platforms and AI tools to analyze human insight in real time and at a massive scale. And finally, clarity and accountability. When you document insights transparently, you create data-driven roadmaps that keep the momentum going long after the event is over.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. I really want you to look at your own organization, your own meetings, those big offsites. Ask yourself this. Are you just gathering people together in a room, or are you actively harvesting their collective intelligence? The tools and the strategies absolutely exist today to turn every single stakeholder interaction into a powerful data-driven engine for innovation. It's time to stop asking, "What now?" and start building what's next. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep learning.